Okay, good afternoon everyone. So actually nawala ka unya no. That's why I'll just be recording this discussion and I'll be uploading it later. However, if you have any questions with regards to the discussion for adjusting entries, please do let me know. Reach me out to Messenger or you can just comment it in the comment section of the video. So for tonight, we will be discussing adjusting entries and the worksheet. So at the end of the lesson, I hope that you will be able to understand the purpose and types of adjusting entries, prepare entries for adjustment, and prepare the worksheet. Okay, so first is a review of accrual basis. So the effect of transactions and other events are recognized when they occur and not as cash received or paid. So this is a review of what we have discussed katong nag face-to-face classes wherein income and expenses are recorded upon when income is earned and when expense is incurred or used. Okay? So this is the opposite of the cash basis kasi sa cash basis, we only record income pag makadawat ng cash and we only record expenses pag magpagawas ta og cash. But in the accrual basis, income is recorded when it's earned and expenses are recorded when it's incurred. Okay, for example, Monte paid the Club Samuel Resorts 200,000 on November 15. So take note, no? In the adjusting entries, it is important to take note of the date. So for 1-day accommodation for the year end, okay? So Club Samuel Resorts received 200,000 pesos. Therefore, the entry to record the receipt of the 20,000 pesos to 200,000 pesos is debit cash credit unearned service revenue to record the received payment. Ayan. However, if you notice, the credit is unearned service revenue and not service revenue. So kani siya nga credit, this is a liability account because i-render pa man nimo siya in the future. As compared to that of a cash basis, you will be on, since nakadawat naman kag 200,000, automatically it will be recorded as an income. So that's the difference between the accrual basis and the cash basis. Okay, for the periodicity concept, we have already discussed this as well. This is the theory or the assumption wherein the infinite life of a business is divided into specific time periods. So it can be months, it can be weeks or years. So depending upon the needed time period. So to measure profit in a fair manner, entities update the income and expenses accounts immediately before the end of the period. So the periodicity concept ensures that accounting information is reported at regular intervals. So if naka-decide mo nga every week siya, then all of your reports will be reported on a weekly basis. Therefore, pag makakita kag report diha, it is automatic that this is good for 1 week. What about for revenue and expense recognition? Revenue is recognized when it is probable that economic benefits will flow to the enterprise, and these economic benefits can be measured reliably. And revenue is earned when the services are rendered or goods are sold delivered. So following the accrual basis of accounting, revenue is only recorded when earned. Kano sa tama kaingon, earned na siya, services have been rendered and goods have been delivered. Goods sold has been delivered. What about for expense? So expense is mag-record ta when there is that decrease in economic benefit. So, for example, nagpalit ta og kanang supplies. Tapos gigamit nato, okay? Nagpalit ta og raw materials. Nagpalit og mga gulay giluto nato for our restaurant. So nabawasan katong process nga nabawasan na atong mga goods. That's the process of making expenditure. Okay, what about the need for adjustment? Why do we need adjustments? Why is there a need to study and learn adjusting entries? Simple lang. Because there are times, or there are a lot of times wherein the actual numbers does not match the numbers in our records. So take for example, nangumpra ta karon og gulay balig 1,000 pesos. Let's say anong date ngayon? October 27. Tapos pag-abot sa October 31, nahurot na ang ato ang kinumpra nga gulay. Okay? So wala na tay gulay. However, sa atong listahan, sa atong records na patay 1,000 worth na gulay. So kailangan nato siya i-adjust. We have to match the actual presence of the gulay as to the gulay that is in our records. So on October 27, natay 1,000 worth nga gulay and natay 1,000 worth sa tuang records. However, on October 31, since nagamit naman nato ang gulay, ato na siyang giluto, wala na tayo gulay, 0 na. And therefore, kailangan po nato i-0 ang ato ang record. So from 1,000, gawin natin 0. So that's the purpose of adjustments and adjusting entries. Okay, without adjusting entries, financial statement may not fairly show the solvency of the entity in the balance sheet and the profitability in the income statement. Kasi nga, di nagmamatch. Okay, deferrals is the postponement of the recognition of an expense already paid. So deferrals are those advance payments nga gibuhat nato for a specific expense. However, since it is an advance payment, we don't automatically record it as an expense, but rather we record it first as an asset. Okay? So examples of deferrals. Okay. Prepaid expenses. So this is the most common, no? Are customarily paid in advance. This expenditure includes, but not limited to, supplies, rent, and insurance. And at the end of the accounting period, i-check natin whether or not mayroon na bang nagamit na portion or mayroon nang na-expire. And then we adjust. So for example, prepaid rent. So the blind barber shop paid 15,000 pesos in advance for a 3 months rent. Okay? So nagbayad siya 15,000 pesos, that's a payment for 3 months rent in advance. So on April 1, take note, nagbayad na, pero wala pa nato gigamit ang renta. So question, do we record an expense? The answer is no. Bakit? Kasi nga, advance payment pa yon. So on April 1, the entry to record the payment is debit, prepaid rent, credit, cash in bank. So nabawasan yung pera natin, kaya meron tayong credit na cash in bank. Then to record advance payment, advancement of rent. Okay? Sir, bakit prepaid rent? Bakit hindi rent expense? Kasi nga, yung payment na yon 15,000 is an advance payment. Wala pa man nato siya nagamit, wala pa man siya na-expire, therefore, it should not be recorded as an expense, but rather prepaid rent. And prepaid rent is an asset. So this is an example of a deferral. On April 31, ano sabi doon sa problem? A portion of the asset expires and becomes an expense each day. By the last day of April, so April 1 ta nagbayad, at the end of April, which is April 30, 1/3 of the asset has expired. So nagamit na nato ang isa ka bulan worth of rent. Therefore, the entry, April 30, the adjustment is debit rent expense. So there is an increase in expense, therefore it should be debited. Pero yes, na-expense, pero wala naman tagdag bayad. Take note, di na tayo nagbayad. Bakit? Kasi binayaran natin siya in advance on April 1. Therefore, bawasan na lang nato ang asset in relation to the rent, which is prepaid rent. Therefore, our prepaid rent from 15,000, nabawasan ng 15,000, 10,000 na lang ang mabilin. So the question is, how many months na lang ang nabili nato nga advance payment? 10,000 pesos, which is good for 2 months. Therefore, our accounting records have matched the actuality balance of the prepaid rent. What about shop supplies? Assuming that bumili tayo ng 35,000 worth of supply. So the entry to record that one is debit, shop supplies, 35,000, cash 35,000. Kung bumili tayo. Now, at the end of the month, yadto na to ang bodega, check na to kung pila na lang ang nabili niya supplies, we have found out that 20,000 na lang po ang natira. Therefore, merong 15,000 na nawala. Okay? However, since wala man tayo data, we don't have the information kung gikawat ba or nawala lang dyan, we will assume that nagamit na siya. So again, bumili tayo ng supplies worth 35,000 pesos. Gibutang nato sa atong bodega. And after nato sa gibutang sa bodega, yunay-nayan nato gamit. And at the end of the period, at the end of the month, pumunta tayo, gi-check nato usab, nag-inventory count ta, 20 mil na lang ang nabilin. Sa ato pa, nabawasan og 15 mil. So from 35,000, kailangan natin siyang gawing 20 to match the inventory that is in our bodega. Therefore, the shop supply should be decreased. Since this is an asset, kailangan ta mag-credit. That is why the adjusting entry for this example is credit, shop supplies lang din gamit. Supplies, shop supplies expense or supplies expense, 15,000 pesos. Since nagamit man nato, we are assuming that nagamit siya, therefore, kailangan ta mag-record og expense. Okay, what about prepaid insurance? So example, prepaid insurance on January 1, 2022, Jose paid 12,000 for a 12-month insurance. So take note, insurance is a product na magpapasalamat ka nga di nimo gamiton, dili nimo magamit. So binabayaran mo lang siya just in case na may masamang mangyari. So in this case, nagbayad si Jose ng 12,000 pesos, good for 12 months insurance on his car. How much insurance expense will be recorded on May 31? Okay, take note of the date, January 1, nagbayad siya, therefore, record prepaid insurance, credit cash. Okay? For the adjustment on May 31, you have to count pila ka months na ang nilabay so that makabalo ta kung pila ang na-expire na portion sa insurance. Okay, so let us count. Do we include January? The answer is yes because it's January 1. So January, February, March, April, May. Do we include May? Yes, kasi it's on May 31. So therefore, 5/12, okay? 5/12, insert tayo ng na equation para hindi masyadong sagwa. Okay. So, the expired portion is 12,000 multiplied by 5 months na nagamit over 12, which is 5,000. Therefore, there is an expired portion of the insurance expense, the prepaid insurance amounting to 5,000. So, from 12, kailangan natin siyang bawasan because may na-expire na amounting to 5,000. And para asa man ang na-expire nga portion, it will be recorded as an expense. So, from 12,000 pesos, nabawasan siyang 5, therefore, may natirang 7,000 pesos worth of prepaid insurance. Okay, what about depreciation of property and equipment? Okay, so when an entity acquires long-lived assets such as building, service vehicle, computer, or furniture, it's basically buying or prepaying for the usefulness of an asset. So, kaning magpalit ta og mga long-lived assets, samaan nila. Mura ni siya deferral gihapon. Deferral in a sense nga gamito nato ni siya for a specific period of time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So katong usefulness niya, na good for 3 years and 5 years, binabayaran natin on the spot. Okay? Mabitang pagpapalit ang sakyanan, automatic, whether cash or installment, we record it at its cost, at its purchase price. Okay? So katong purchase price nato sa long-lived assets, that is like a prepayment. Binabayaran natin agad. We record the purchase for its full amount and then hinahinayan nato na siya og expense. Mura lang gyapon ingani no. Yung bayaran nato January 1, 12,000 ginatidbukan and then every month, every year bawas-bawasan nato siya hinahinay. Okay. 3 factors or 3 terms that you need to be familiar with. Number 1 is asset cost. is the amount an entity paid to acquire the depreciable asset. So, pinaka-basic lang, kung pila mong gibayad for that long-lived asset, then that is your asset cost. Number 2, estimated salvage value or scrap value. So, assets, after using them for quite some time, naana siya resale value. Or in other words, salvage value or scrap value. Kanang term nga salvage manggod, it is the equivalent of that is salbar. Dili na siya murder or gipatay. Salvage means napakay na salbar nga gamit, napakay na salbar nga value. So, for example, cellphone, bibilihin mo ng 10,000 pesos. Okay? Bibilihin mo siya ng 10,000 pesos, gagamitin for siya for 3 years. And then after 3 years, let's say, pwede mo pa siyang ibenta ng 3,000 after using it for 3 years. So, katong 3,000 dito, that's the scrap value or the salvage value. Is the amount that the asset can probably be sold for at the end of its useful life. And number 3, the estimated useful life. So every long-lived asset, it should also be identified kung pila nimo siya katuig gamiton. Okay. The tricky thing about depreciation is that the asset account will not be directly reduced when recording depreciation expense. Okay? So instead, dili nato siya ginaingani. For example, sa prepaid insurance, nag-record tag asset, prepaid insurance, and pag naanay na expire or pag naanay na gamit, we record an expense account and then bawasan nato directly ang asset account. Sa long-lived assets, hindi natin yan ginagawa. Instead of directly reducing the asset account, we use a contra account called accumulated depreciation. Okay? Later, I'll explain and I'll show you unsa na siya. A contra account, take note, is used to record reductions. Okay? In related accounts, and its normal balance is the opposite. For example, assets are normally balanced. The normal balance of assets is debit. So the contra account is always credit. Okay, the balance of the contra account is deducted from the cost to obtain the book value. I'll also show you what does this mean. Okay, how do we compute depreciation? So marami, no? There are a lot of methods in computing for depreciation, but for purposes of discussion, we'll only be focusing on the straight line method. However, if you're interested in knowing the other methods, then tell me and I'll discuss it to you. So depreciation under the straight line method is debit. Depreciation is equals to asset minus scrap value or the salvage value if there's any, and then divided by the useful life. So to show you paano gamitin tong formula to, let's have an equipment which was bought April 1. Again, take note of the date. With a value of 500,000. It can be used for 10 years or 120 months and a salvage value of 20,000 pesos. Okay, so upon the purchase of equipment, we record equipment debit, credit cash 500,000 to record purchase of equipment. Okay, for the depreciation, asset cost which is 500 minus the 20,000 na scrap value. So mo siya ginatawag nato nga depreciable cost. So this is the only depreciable value or depreciable cost. I'm not sure no. Anyways, this is the value nga i-depreciate nato over the years. Okay? Kasi it is expected man nga mura lang na siyang mopalit kag kotse 500,000. Bibili ka ng car 500,000. Tapos gamiton nimo siya for 3 years tapos expected nimo mabaligya nimo siyang 300,000. So 500 minus the scrap value of 300, 200 lang. So it is as if technically the value of the car na imong nagamit is only 200,000. Parang ganun lang din 'yan. So instead of depreciating the entire 500, we'll only be depreciating it for the 480,000. Again, divided by the useful life. In this case, it's in months. The example is in months. Okay? So the depreciation per month is 4,000. So 480, kung diskumpiyado mo, no? divided by 120 months. Therefore, 4,000 per month. And then we record the adjusting entry. So debit, depreciation expense, kasi nga nagamit natin siya good for 1 month, and will be, since nagamit natin siya, that's an equivalent to that demands an expense amounting to 4,000. Ayog kalimot siyang apelido nga shop equipment. Kasi later on, as we have more discussion and I'll be introducing more and more asset class for long-lived assets, managhan na ning depreciation expense. So, importante nga butangan nimo siya apelyido for us to determine asa related na siya nga depreciation expense. The same goes for accumulated depreciation. Mga na itong ingon ako sa inyo nga instead of crediting the equipment account, we credit the accumulated depreciation, the contra account. Again, apelyido shop equipment, 4,000. Okay. Unsa to'y allow me to explain or demonstrate ano yung sinasabi dito na the balance of the contra account is deducted from the cost to obtain the book value. Okay. So the cost of the equipment is 500,000. Okay? Even if magamit na nato siya for 10 years, the cost will always be recorded at its historical price or cost, which is 500,000. The only thing nga modako is the accumulated depreciation. Okay, so in this case, naanatay accumulated depreciation nga good for 1 month, which amounts to 4,000. So therefore, mali din no. Should be 96, 496. Therefore, the book value of the equipment is only 496. So 500,000 less the accumulated depreciation of 4,000. Therefore, the book value, we arrive at the book value of 496. This is the cost. Okay, this is the equipment. Okay, under our records, the equipment will still be valid at 500,000. Pero sa ilalim niya, nakabutang ng accumulated depreciation, 4,000. Tapos naka-parentheses, therefore, kailangan siya i-deduct, leading us to a book value of 496. So for shop and furniture, the same lang. Cost is 130, salvage value is 10. So therefore, 130 minus 10, the depreciable cost is 120 divided by 120 months. That's a 1,000 per month depreciation. Depreciation expense, pilido, 1,000, debit, then credit, accumulated depreciation, then ay kalimot sa apelido, 1,000. So the book value is 129,000. Allocating revenues received in advance to revenues. So you're familiar with this one, kanang makadawat tag cash nga advance payment sa atong customers. The debit cash kasi nakadawat man ta, naman tayo nadawat na 50,000. But then again, we will not be recording service revenue kasi nga the only time na magre-record tayo ng revenue under accrual basis of accounting is if na-earn na nato siya. And kung saan na siya ma-earn if the goods sold has been delivered or the services has been rendered. So in this case, since advance payment pa man siya, we record it as unearned as a liability. And then, ano sabi? By the end of the month, 15,000 has been realized. Therefore, 15,000 daw has been rendered. 15,000 worth of services has been rendered. So, we record a service revenue credit. Since service revenue, when we increase it, it demands a credit, 15,000 pesos. And then we reduce the liability account. Liability account are reduced by debiting them. Therefore, unearned service revenue, 15,000. So, kung magbuhat tag T account, na atay initial balance nga 50,000, tapos nag-debit ta og 15,000. Therefore, at the end of the month, the balance of our unearned service revenue is only 35,000 na lang. Credit. Okay, for accruals naman, accrued expenses. So when we talk of accrued expenses, it refers to expenses incurred but not yet paid. For example, kadawat kang bill sa kurente. Nagamit na nimong bill sa kurente, bill sa tubig, bill sa internet, nagamit mo na yan. That is why you have to record them as expenses. However, since di mo pa siya binabayaran, you will also be recording a liability account. Sir, dili na pwede sir nga dito na ka mag-record og expense pag magbayad na ka. The answer is no. Kasi what if next month po pa siya babayaran? So kato nga expense will be recorded for the next month. Considering nga dapat karong bulan naman siya. Okay? So as to make our records appropriate and correct, accurate, so we have to apply accrual basis. Okay, accrued salaries. So let us assume that the shop cashier and employees were paid salaries every second and fourth week of the month, okay, with a 6-day work week. At the end of the month, the employees have worked for 4 days, okay, 7, 8, 9:30. That's beyond the last day of the period. So the employees have earned the salary for these days but is not due to be paid until the regular payday in May. Okay? Since siguro Monday na siya, no? Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So wala pa Friday and Saturday. So dili pa sila masweldohan. But take note, kaning upat ka adlaw, this falls on April, for the month of April. So to set a cut-off and to record properly nga kaning expenses dili na siya motabok sa May, kailangan na ta mag-record on April 30 og accrued salaries good for 4 days. Kay kung mo record ta og salaries pagbayad na sa May 1 and 2, okay? Pagka 2 na ka mo bayad, so nitabok na ang atong expenses sa May even for the fact na kani nga swelduhan para ni sa bulan sa Abril. Okay, for a while. Check ko lang yung messenger ko. Okay. Iigang. Inaigang ko guys, no? Di pa ko gusto nga itunong ang electric fan manggod sa ako. Anyways, sana ako? Okay, each employee salary rate is 9,100 per month or 350 per day. So we have 350 per day multiplied by 4 days multiplied by 5 employees. So that's 7,000 pesos. So we record the accrued salaries. So on April 30, Thursday, debit salaries expense 7,000 and then salaries payable 7,000. Para lang jud mabulag, no? Mabulag ang sweldo for the month of, kung pila jud ang for the month of April and for the month of May. So the liability of 7,000 is now correctly reflected in the salaries payable account. The actual expense incurred for salaries during the month is 45,500. On May 1, hindi, dapat na to May 2 eh. Kasi 6 days work week man daw. Saturday, tapos 350 times 2 days times 5 employees. So 3,500. On May 2, we will now be recording another set of salaries expense. Tama ba niya kung total? 3,500 plus 7,000. Ayun. On May 2, which is the 6 days man, di ba? 6 days man ilang work week. Mag-record ang puntag salaries expense. And we will also be paying for we'll also be deducting or reducing the salaries payable kasi magbabayad tayo on this day. So therefore, on May 2, magbabayad tayo ng total of 10,500 good for 6 days. Pero ang kaning 6 days, it has been divided into 4 days for April, and then 2 days for the month of May, making our records accurate. The record payment of salaries. Okay. Accrued interest. So, accrued interest is simply the recording of interest that has been incurred if it is interest expense or earned if it is interest income. So, in April 2, take note again, nangutang daw tao 200,000 from Two Network Bank. So, Babulag issued a note that carried 12% interest per annum. So, nang hulam ta or si Babulag og 200,000 tapos kato nga utang mo bayad sa interest amounting to 12% per year. Mo na pasabot sa per annum. Both the interest and the principal will be payable in 1 year. The note issued to the bank accrues interest at 12% per month, per year. So, nanghulam ta, 200, April 2, and then at the end of April, kailangan ta mag-record og accrued interest. Kay katapusan man gud sa April, naa na tay bayro nun nga interest. So, pila pod sir. Okay? How to compute? Principal interest is computed as follows. Principal times rate times length of time. So, in this case, the principal is 200,000 multiplied by 12%. Okay? So, I hope na by now, kabalo na mo kung unsa ang equivalent sa decimal sa 12%. Okay? So, 200,000 times 12% or 0.12 multiplied by 1/12. Okay? So, anong 1/12 man? Because the 12% is good for 1 year. And we will only be computing good for 1 month. So, 1 month over 12 months. Therefore, the interest at the end of April is 2,000. Again, question, is this an interest income or is this an interest expense? The answer is interest expense. Kasi nga, tayo yung umutang. Interest income kung kita ang nagpautang. So, nadungagan ang ato ang interest at the end of April. So, since nadungagan, do we debit or credit interest expense? Debit. That is why, for the accrued interest, we have a debit of interest expense, credit, interest payable kasi di pa naman natin babayaran. Babayaran natin ang utang natin and the interest next year. So to record accrual of interest. For accrued revenues, actually pareha man no. These are just advance payment. Advance payment of customers at TUA recorded as liabilities. So, all in all, these are the summary. Pero walay labot diretong walay labot diretong prepaid insurance. So, gisingit lang ako tong prepaid insurance sa taas para kumpleto ang atong example. Okay, so this is just a summary of all the adjusting entries na ginawa natin. And then, afterwards, just like in the journal entries, journal entry, ledger, and then trial balance. So, kani nga trial balance mo na sa atong gibuhat last time. And then we add another column, adjustments. Okay. So if you've noticed, ang ato ang trial balance sa una, diri lang taman. I think diri lang taman siguro to no. Sa ba to taman? Income summary raman siguro to taman or sa service revenue. So we will be add more particulars now. We'll be adding additional. We'll be adding account titles nga wala. So, add lang ta dire, sumpay lang ta, and then the amount will be recorded or transferred in the adjustment column. May debit and credit pa rin. So, for example, prepaid rent, credit. Asa nagikan? Dire, sa prepaid rent. Ayan, prepaid rent, 9,000 pesos. And then we also have a 15,000 credit shop supplies. Saan galing yan? Yan, shop supplies, 15,000. So, meron na tayong unadjusted. Take note ha, this is unadjusted. Singit ko na lang yung Singit na lang tayo ng ganito. Para di mo malibog. Oops, medyo malaki yung font natin. Tayo natin paliitan. Yapon. Yan. Unadjusted trial balance. Wala ng J. Oops. Yan. Unadjusted. So this is your unadjusted trial balance. We have the adjustments here. And then, meron tayong additional na naman na adjusted trial balance. So, saan naa sa adjusted trial balance? This is actually just, walang na siya, kanang tawagan niya. This is just a total of the unadjusted trial balance plus minus the adjustments. So, for example, debit. Hindi. Sorry. Cash in bank. Sa unadjusted, we have a debit of 538,250. Wala namang adjustment, so carry forward mo lang yung balance. Accounts receivable, 14,000 debit, no adjustment, carried forward mo lang. For the prepaid rent, debit, 15,000, pero may adjustment siya na credit. Therefore, 10,000 ang mabilin. So, 15 minus 5, 10,000 debit. Shop supplies, debit, 35,000 less 15,000. So, may debit na 20,000. Shop equipment, wala naman, 500, 500. For the accumulated depreciation, wala siyang balance dito. Pero may balance siya dito na credit, 4,000. Ito lang din yung i-transfer mo dito sa adjusted trial balance. So for these three columns, the unadjusted, make sure na balance yan. For the adjustment, make sure na balance din yan. And for the adjusted, make sure na balance din yan. So that's it, Pansit. Thank you so much for listening. I hope naabot mo diri ang part. And if you have questions, just let me know.